Alright, what's up you guys? I am here with my 2017 WWE pay-per-view ranking video. I just got done 2018, so we're going backwards with 2017 being next. So this was kind of tough because usually I show the DVDs. We have a bunch of double features, so I'm going to have to show the disc for one pay-per-view and then the DVD case for the other. So, dead last, the worst pay-per-view of the year, Battleground. I almost went to this, and I am so glad that I didn't. You know, you had Rusev and John Cena in a very slow flag match. You know, you had the New Day and the Usos in pretty much the only good match on the card. This felt like a lot like Backlash 2018. Like, it just had one good match to start off, and then everything else was terrible. And, of course, you had the Punjabi prison match with Randy Orton and Jinder Mahal during Jinder Mahal's lovely title reign, which we'll get to. So, yeah, Battleground 2017 was just a terrible, terrible pay-per-view. And, you know, I remember watching it and just being baffled by how bad it was. You know, I don't think it's worse than Backlash 2018, but it's definitely the worst pay-per-view of 2017. Next up, we have Payback 2017. This pay-per-view was a wreck. We had Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns. You know, they had a decent rivalry going on at the time. You had Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens in a decent match. But we had the House of Horrors match, which was unbelievably bad. You know, this was just a very generic Raw pay-per-view, and, you know, it's just, it was the first pay-per-view after WrestleMania, so you had a lot going on. You had, like I said, you had Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, non-title, so, you know, you were coming off a decent WrestleMania, and, you know, I don't know. You know, it's the start of the stretch of low ratings and just not the best pay-per-views. You know, that May, June, July hump is usually something you got to get over, and Payback really didn't do it. Next up, we have Backlash 2017. We had Nakamura versus Dolph Ziggler, Nakamura's pay-per-view debut, and he made his cover debut as well. You had Kevin Owens and AJ Styles, which is really the only really good match on the card. And then we had Jinder Mahal winning the WWE title, as you can see, versus Randy Orton. And I had a feeling he was going to win, because why else would he be pushed like that, unless you're just going to try to make a shock moment. And I just didn't want to believe it. Just not a good pay-per-view overall. It's very much along the lines with Payback. You can almost say they're tied at that point. Next up, we have Clash of Champions 2017. Really cool cover, I'll give it that. But we had, you know, just kind of a very generic SmackDown pay-per-view. We had Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan as special guest referees for Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus Randy Orton and Shinsuke Nakamura. You know, we had AJ Styles defending his newly won title against Jinder Mahal. We had Charlotte versus Natalya in a lumberjack match. Didn't they used to call them lumberjill matches? I guess they're not allowed to do that anymore. And, you know, we had Rusev and Aiden English, The New Day, and Chad Gable and Shelton Benjamin versus the Usos. So, you know, you can tell they tried with this pay-per-view, but in the end, when you have Jinder Mahal versus AJ Styles, how good can you really get at that point? You know, I don't want to say it's a terrible pay-per-view, but it's just definitely not one that I'll honestly think I'll ever watch again. Next up, we have Fastlane 2017. You know, Goldberg and Kevin Owens, that match, you know, I kind of predicted how it was going to go. I was hoping not. But it was a squash match. You know, you had Chris Jericho coming in and just ruining it. And this is just not a memorable pay-per-view at all whatsoever. And that's unfortunate because, you're supposed to have this big build-up to WrestleMania. So to have, this pay-per-view just be a letdown, it's disappointing. We also had Bayley versus Charlotte Flair, and we had Braun Strowman taking on Roman Reigns. So once again, this pay-per-view felt like filler going into WrestleMania. It didn't really feel like it was advancing too much, except for the Kevin Owens-Chris Jericho storyline. But other than that, just a very generic pay-per-view. Next up, we have probably my personal least favorite pay-per-view of the year, but it's not the worst. That's why I'm not ranking it the worst. All personal feelings aside when it comes to these rankings. TLC 2017. This had... Look, the main event, it's one of those things you either loved it or you hated it. I hated the main event. So, for me, it just didn't work out. I just was not entertained by this event. We had the famous meningitis outbreak. So, Kurt Angle was coming back to the ring for the first time. And we did get a great Finn Balor AJ Styles match. So that was awesome. Really good match. I feel like it could have went a little longer, but it was still epic, as you can see on the back there. I don't know. I mean, I remember watching this. You had Asuka and Emma right before Emma's unfortunate firing. And you have Enzo against Kalisto. So, it's just like a lot of filler, and it just didn't feel like a TLC pay-per-view. You just had the one TLC match in the main event, and everything else was just regular match. It felt just like a regular Raw pay-per-view. So that's a problem. When you have a gimmick pay-per-view, you got to play off that gimmick. This year's TLC did a little bit better with that, and was a much better pay-per-view all around. Next up, we have Money in the Bank. The women's match will go down in infamy for just being, awful. Absolutely awful ending. It was a decent match, but awful ending. You had a good Money in the Bank ladder match. They were teasing AJ Styles and Nakamura. That was pretty epic. And then you had Baron Corbin winning the briefcase, which we all know eventually went to shit. But, yeah, I still did like this pay-per-view. I just feel like it doesn't really have much to offer. We had Randy Orton and Jinder Mahal again. So, it's just, it was alright. And this is an example of just having a very, just kind of average pay-per-view. And we also saw the New Day versus the Usos. So that's always great. And, you can never complain when they're in the ring together. Next up, we have a pay-per-view that I was in attendance for, Extreme Rules 2017. And, it was a cool event to go to. Watching it back, it's not the greatest Extreme Rules pay-per-view, but I do think it has some to offer. Like, I did enjoy it. We had a steel cage match, The Bar versus the Hardys. You had a terrible match with Alexa Bliss and Bayley in the Singapore cane on a pole match, or kendo stick on a pole match. Just awful. And then, The Miz and Dean Ambrose had a decent match. Kind of stupid, being it's Extreme Rules, and he loses the title if he gets DQ'd. Whatever. But the main event was pretty epic. You had Samoa Joe winning, which was awesome. The Fatal 5-Way match with Seth Rollins, Finn Balor, Bray Wyatt, Roman Reigns, and Samoa Joe. And just in case you're going to ask me, yes, I do like single-branded pay-per-views. I don't like that 2018 and going forward we have co-branded pay-per-views. I kind of like the classic Ruthless Aggression era feel to it, but it is what it is. Like I said, I prefer 3-hour single branded pay-per-views. Next up, we have No Mercy. I enjoyed this pay-per-view. I think the main event between Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman was disappointing, but I did love the John Cena-Roman Reigns match. I like that whole rivalry going in. I really enjoyed that match. You had Alexa Bliss defending against Bayley, Sasha Banks, Emma, and Nia Jax in a fatal 5-way match, which was enjoyable. And overall, I think this, it was a good paced pay-per-view, and I just think the main event was bullshit. If the main event was better, this would be ranked a lot higher. It was just disappointing. A lot of people expected this match because it was so built up over time between Braun Strowman and Brock Lesnar that it was a failure to a lot of people. And, it is good to see Brock Lesnar actually defending the title on a B pay-per-view. So, that's always good to see. Next up, we have Great Balls of Fire. Terrible pay-per-view name, but I really enjoyed this one, especially the main event. We had Samoa Joe versus Brock Lesnar, as you can see there. This was awesome. That was a great match. Samoa Joe looked red hot. We all knew he wasn't going to win, but I'm just happy they made him look as strong as he did facing Lesnar. And then we had an ambulance match with Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns, which was good. It took a little while to actually gain some speed to it. And the ending was hinting at a double turn. And, the ending was epic, but nothing really came out of it. Not surprisingly, but, you also had a good 30-minute Iron Man match with the Hardys in the bar. I really enjoyed that match as well, especially the last, probably the latter half was just really good. So, next up we have Elimination Chamber, the SmackDown pay-per-view. This was a really epic pay-per-view. You had a surprisingly good match with Luke Harper and Randy Orton. They killed it. That was great. You had a great main event with the new Elimination Chamber. I prefer the old original Chamber, personally. They just kind of PG-ified it, but, they put padding and all that and lighting around it. But you had Bray Wyatt, The Miz, Dean Ambrose, Baron Corbin, AJ Styles, and John Cena. And then Bray Wyatt pinned AJ Styles and John Cena. And he came out on top, and it was a great moment. I remember watching that live, and I was just really happy for Bray Wyatt, because, he's not my favorite wrestler, but I do think he definitely deserves it. So, good for him. And it gives you that kind of feel-good moment at the end, even though he was, sort of playing the heel. But, it was a great final stop for SmackDown, at least, for WrestleMania. And speaking of WrestleMania, we have WrestleMania 33. This is, I wouldn't put this on my favorite WrestleMania list, but I'm also not going to put it on my least favorite. To me, this one had its moments, but overall for me, I didn't enjoy it as quite as much as, 34, or I did enjoy it more than 32, being how much I hate 32, but, I thought this was your example of an average WrestleMania. The presentation was out of this world. The Citrus Bowl looked amazing that night. Seth Rollins and Triple H had a decent match. You had a match of the night opener with Shane McMahon and AJ Styles. And, the Cruiserweight title match on the pre-show, which is unfortunately not on the DVD, that match was really good as well. So, when it comes to some of the misses, we had the main event, of course, being Roman Reigns and Undertaker. Just not a good match. But great moment at the end to, finalize the night, even though, Nothing really came out of that. It wasn't the real retirement. And then, of course, we had the terrible match that was Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, which is unfortunate because Bray Wyatt had just had a great showing at Elimination Chamber. So that was disappointing. But, you had both women's titles on the line. We had the John Cena proposal, which is now just funny to watch. And then a great match with Goldberg and Brock Lesnar. It may have went short, but it was a entertaining as hell match. So, overall, this was an average WrestleMania, but one of the better pay-per-views of the year. Next up, I'm going to put SummerSlam 2017. This had the best SummerSlam main event in a long time. This was awesome. We had a fatal four-way. Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, Roman Reigns, and Brock Lesnar for the Universal title. You had John Cena burying Baron Corbin. We had Demon Balor coming back against Bray Wyatt. And, overall, I thought this was a good pay-per-view. You had Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins winning the tag titles. We had AJ Styles versus Kevin Owens with Shane McMahon as your special guest referee. And on kind of a down note, we had Nakamura versus Jinder Mahal, but you gotta throw that in there somewhere, I guess. And, this was a very enjoyable pay-per-view, though. I remember watching it and being satisfied, especially with the end, main event. Obviously I didn't want Brock to win, but it was a hell of a main event. It was a crash course, which sometimes that's what matches have to be. I prefer traditional wrestling, like, for example, Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles at TLC this year. Probably my favorite match of the year. It was very smooth, classic wrestling, but sometimes I love ECW, I love CZW, hardcore wrestling. That catered to, both types of fans. So, good stuff. Next up, at number 3, I have Hell in a Cell 2017. This saw the kind of grand finale to the Usos versus the New Day rivalry in a fantastic Hell in a Cell match. And then, of course, the main event, Shane McMahon and Kevin Owens. And I give it some extra points because that match, the ending with Sami Zayn helping Kevin Owens out, that legitimately surprised a lot of people. And nowadays, things like that leak. People aren't surprised. They can predict stuff like that. So if you're able to surprise me like that, you deserve credit. And that was a great tension-building Hell in a Cell match. And, just so, because when they were fighting on top of the cage, it was just so enjoyable, because you didn't know if they were going through it, you didn't know if someone was going off it. We can all assume Shane McMahon's doing something crazy off of it. So, we also saw Nakamura and Jinder Mahal, which is, once again, pretty much the same match as SummerSlam. But, this was a great pay-per-view. And for the PG era, we had 2 great Hell in a Cell matches. Next up, we have my personal favorite pay-per-view of the year, but I'm not going to rank it number 1. We have Survivor Series 2017. I think this would be number 1 if the main event was better, the elimination match. If the elimination match was anything like 2016's, I would put this number 1. But unfortunately, I can't, because the main event was a disappointment. Triple H pretty much just buried everybody at the end. And then we had a great match with Brock Lesnar and AJ Styles. When I was watching that, we all knew the result. Because one of the biggest flaws was they kept score. And that was kind of a spoiler for a lot of the matches. I knew Brock was going to go over, but this match still had me at the end of my seat. This was still, thought-provoking, and just, you didn't know who was going to win, even though we did. So, for them to be able to fool us like that, awesome. We also had the New Day versus the Shield. You had, a decent women's traditional 5-on-5 match. And then we had Alexa Bliss taking on Charlotte, which was a good match. I really enjoyed that one. So, overall, I even got a Becky Lynch Fathead sticker, which means a lot more than it did back then. So, awesome. So yeah, Survivor Series 2017, ranking at number 2. So before I show number 1, let me know what your ranking would be down below, and, what you thought of the year 2017 overall. But number 1, the Royal Rumble. This was such an epic pay-per-view. My personal favorite match of 2017, just like WWE-wise and main roster, John Cena versus AJ Styles. That is one of my all-time favorite WWE title matches. Classic. And then we had another great match with Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens. That match was really good too. And then we had a really good Royal Rumble. You had Goldberg in there. You had Goldberg eliminating Brock, which was just another surprise moment to follow up from the Survivor Series. You had Undertaker in there. Just some, Brock Lesnar, like I said. A lot of the faces you don't see in the Rumble anymore, they were in there. And this also came with an Undertaker sticker. So, like I said, both world title matches were, big wins on their part. And then the Hell in a Cell match. Hell in a Cell. My God, I'm tired. The Royal Rumble match. I was looking at the Undertaker sticker and I thought the Hell in a Cell. Anyway, the Royal Rumble match was a big hit as well. So overall, top to bottom, this was a very enjoyable pay-per-view and just an epic event. We were, back at the same place that we had, 97, the Alamo Dome. So, just really good stuff. So let me know your listing down below. And for now, this has been the DVD Freak. Peace out.